Well, my full name is Robert John Feith, but John didn't come in until I was confirmed. And that name came about because of my grandfather, and he was John Gallinitis. So they gave me that name in honor of him. I was born in Bayonne, New Jersey, in 1936 on September the 25th. My grandmother came from Lithuania on my mother's side, and she wasn't supposed to be in this country. Her sister was supposed to come here. Only her sister had some type of trouble with her eyes, so she couldn't come, and my grandmother went in her stead. How she met my grandfather, I know not. Now, he is also Lithuanian, but I have not been able to find any record of him at all. And I remember him very well. He used to take me down the park, and we would go down the basement, and back then they did everything themselves. They repaired their own shoes, they made their own firewood, you name it, he did it, everything. On my father's side, I never knew his father's father, although I have a record of him coming to America as a saddle maker. And my grandfather, he came here with his father, and he was just a kid at the time, and the first recollection I have of ever finding information about him was him working as a bartender and accountant in New York City. My mother spoke Lithuanian and English, married my father. Don't know how they met. They originally got married, I believe, in Bayonne, although I never found their marriage license. Well, my mother and father were ordinary parents. There was nothing special or unique or anything about them. My father originally was a machinist, but he hated to work inside, and he left that occupation and went into installing aluminum doors, windows, awnings, things like that, and he did that for the rest of his life. My mother worked for Maiden Form over in Bayonne until she retired. She retired when she moved down here to New Jersey sometime in the early 60s. There's no way I could help them in their work as far as contributing to family income. I probably gave them a few dollars out of my paycheck every week when I was working, but I don't recall how much. My family was Catholic. They didn't really go to church. I went to Catholic grammar school, and that was after we moved to Clove Road. Prior to that, I went to PS 45. When we moved, they transferred me into Blessed Sacrament. And I spent my 8 years there, graduated, and went on to Curtis High School, being the only child in the entire class who went to a public school. My parents weren't involved politically in anything, and I have no idea what their political beliefs were. At that point in time, it wasn't anything that interested me. I didn't have any political beliefs. Growing up, I had contact with many relatives. There was everybody on my mother's side of the family, my grandfather, grandmother, Aunt Mary, Aunt Mamie, Aunt Anna, Uncle Eddie, Uncle John, their children. On my father's side, there was his brother, Henry, his children, Walter, Henny, John, and Margaret, as well as his wife, Catherine. I talked about my grandparents on my mother's side, but not too much about the grandparents on my father's side. And I just want to touch, they were good people too. My grandfather, my cousin Margaret, thought that he may have been in the Boer War, but his age doesn't fit, and I seriously doubt that. But I do remember when I was a young child in grammar school, he would tell me stories about Africa. I can't remember them now, but he had quite a few about Africa. And the other thing about him, he never said he was German. He was always Austrian. And I think that had something to do with World War II, because even World War I, people were against Germany because they had started the wars. So by being Austrian, he didn't bring that upon himself. And I didn't know this, but he had told my wife, not he had told my wife, but my mother had told my wife that during World War I, my father and his brother were being kind of like picked on at school because they were German. And he took them out of a public school and put them in St. Mary's Catholic School to avoid that problem. I don't know how true it was, but you know, this is the story. But they were really good people. My grandfather, my father, so we used to take walks down the park and everything. And my grandmother belonged to the Zoological Society at the Staten Island Zoo, and she would come down and take me to the lectures that they had there in the evening and everything. And I really enjoyed their company. times were so much different back then than they are now. They were simpler. People were more honest. And you just can't compare it. Today is just a clutter compared to the simplicity of the 40s and the 50s. Growing up, with respect to my grandparents in Bayonne, especially during the 40s, their son Edward went into the Army, my uncle, and he eventually became a sergeant and everything. But at that time, it was a scary time. And they would hang up a banner or a flag in their window with a star to show that somebody in their family was, in the Army. And he went through the Battle of the Bulge and all that other stuff. And at that time, I was interested in firearms, and he had sent me a sniper's rifle. And it was a beautiful weapon. He only sent me the barrel and the mechanism, not the stock. I had to put that on. I couldn't get that in the mail. But you couldn't buy bullets for it. They didn't make them over here. So I kept the rifle for a number of years and eventually traded it in for a .22 caliber rifle. But the interesting part about that was he sent home samples of the food that they gave him in the Army. And it was during World War II that we first tasted instant coffee, where you took it and you put it in the thing and added the hot water to it. It was so unique. Nobody believed it until they saw it. And I found that part interesting. I was the firstborn, and I had my brother Carl. I was 6 years older than him. He was actually about 5'8", and he always wanted to go on a police force when he graduated high school, and he was always worried that he wouldn't make it because of it. He just made it into the police department. But he was good. Growing up, we were 6 years different, so we didn't really have the same friends or anything. The older he got, the closer we got, especially after he got married. And he died when he was only 40 years old, so that was a terrible loss. He died of pancreatic cancer. He was with the police department for some years, and he found he didn't like that type of work, so he quit. Moved upstate New York to the Adirondack Mountains and tried to start his own business building log cabins. He persevered in building a cabin that he himself lived in with his family, but the business just never took off, and after a couple of years he had to abandon that. And after that he went back to school, graduated college, and got a job teaching at one of the correctional facilities upstate New York. And he wasn't there long enough to really, do anything meaningful when he contracted pancreatic cancer, and within a year he was dead. The house I grew up in at 637 Clove Road was a house that had one full floor and a second floor that was similar to a Cape Cod. The basement was unfinished, but my grandfather had put a bathroom downstairs in the basement. The first floor consisted of a sun porch, what was originally probably a dining room, which they converted into a bedroom, the kitchen. Then there was a small study, which was like an anteroom after they finished. Then there was the living room, or as it was called back then, the parlor, that had a nice fireplace in it. The second floor consisted of 4 rooms. Now, it was made into a 2-family house for my grandparents at one point in time, so there was a kitchen, a bathroom. Then there were 3 other rooms. They were all bedrooms. After we got married, we converted the bedrooms into a bedroom, a living room, and so on and so forth. While I was a kid, I occupied the small front room that had a dormer in it. Heating was supplied by oil heat, which never quite made it to the second floor. The neighborhood was great. To get to a store, you had to walk 4.5 blocks. But it was a wonderful neighborhood because it was right across the street from Clove Lakes Park. I went down there every single day almost. Winter we did sleigh riding, ice skating, and the zoo was only 1.5 blocks away. So we had a lot to do. The home consisted of playing with the dog Sandy, reading, going out and fishing, ice skating in the winter all the time. Also, we did a lot of work, or I did a lot of work, with archery. We were always out. I mean, we would go out on a bicycle at 9 o'clock in the morning and not come home till 9 o'clock at night. I've ridden completely around Staten Island with my bike and friends. There was no curfews or anything. You know, it got dark and we weren't doing anything. We'd play games, tag or whatever it was. We had a good time. There wasn't anything special, but there wasn't anything unique either. That's what everybody did then. Spare time. I spent down the park, you know, bow and arrow, air rifle, fishing, archery, also riding a bicycle all over Staten Island. I did a lot of reading, probably turned on by my father. He brought me to an antique store where he showed me copies of books written by Horatio Alger Jr. And these were the poor kids who made it good. So I must have read about 10 of those. From there I went into Tom Swift. From there I went into the Hardy Boys. And from there I went into Edgar Rice Burroughs with his Tarzan and his science fiction series. I read some Jules Verne, but all in all, a lot of reading. I would read just about anything I get my hands on. As far as hobby, I used to build model airplanes and boats. And my cousin's son, he built great model airplanes, and we used to go down the park and fly them. Growing up, you have to realize during the 1940s, that was a years of World War II. Everybody had ration stamps, and you could only buy so much and do so much. Cars had to have their headlights, half of them painted black. Gasoline was at a premium. Couldn't buy that without stamps. Couldn't buy butter without stamps. Couldn't buy a lot of things without stamps. Now, if you wanted it and you didn't have the stamps, sometimes you could trade with somebody who didn't need it for what you wanted, and vice versa. But those were difficult times. You would have to, a certain nights you'd hear the air raid sirens, and sure, it was a fake, but you could never be positive. And the air raid warden would go around, make sure your shades were down, and there were no lights on in the house, things like that. At school, we used to go out and we used to collect milkweed and bring it to the school for the war effort. We used to go out and get newspapers and bring it to the school. After you got 100 pounds of newspapers, you got a ticket to a movie theater. So we did all of those things. Things were at a premium. You couldn't buy car rubber. You couldn't do a lot of stuff. As a child around the house, it depends how you define childhood. When you're real small, you don't have anything to do. You don't even carry out the garbage. You get into high school, it gets a little bit more complicated. Now you got to cut the grass, you got to trim the hedges, take the dog out for a walk, water the flowers, and do all those other things. But other than that, no, you really didn't have any duties. Well, growing up, as a family, we did things. Every Easter, every Christmas, we would go over to my grandmother's house in Bayonne. And that was an experience because they were very devout Catholics. And the priest would come with the communion bread on Christmas and hand it out. And they were very liberal as far as their thinking goes. Everybody at the table, unless you were too young to raise a glass, got a shot of whiskey. Now, you didn't have to drink it, but it was there if you wanted it. And usually it only took one sip and you didn't want it anymore. That kind of thing. And she was always cooking, homemade bread, kishchikis, borscht, you name it. She cooked it, she made it. We had the tree in the living room. The presents were under it. We opened it, and we were happy. That's about it. We always planned, on going over to my grandmother's house. That was tradition, just like Easter. We did other things too. We used to go to Bud Lake, Lake Opatcon, Greenwood Lake. Drive down to Asbury Park. Do things for a day or something like that. We'd drive down to Asbury Park, and on the way home, we get a bushel of plum tomatoes and eat them in the car. We go up to Bud Lake or Lake Opatcon. We'd always stop at White Castle and grab something. On the way home, we'd listen to the radio shows we liked, The Shadow and Superman and Gene Autry or whatever was on at the time. Well, grammar school is a Catholic school. You know about that, don't you? I mean, you do the right thing or else. But they were very strict. I would put them as tyrannical. Let's put it this way. In grammar school, everything was controlled by the Monsignor, the head priest. Now, every Friday, you had a movie in the auditorium. But if you got mad, you didn't get that movie, okay? If you didn't like the way things went, well, you just didn't get to do it. And everything was, at that point in time, we're talking now about the late 40s, okay? If you weren't Catholic, you were going to hell. No two ways about that. Nobody else existed. If you didn't believe in their religion, You're up shit's creek. Ain't nothing going to happen. That's good. So it kind of turned me off. That's why I was the only kid who went to a public school when I graduated. But I won a religion medal. Go figure. I don't think I belonged to any particular group. I seemed to get along with everybody. I had a few close friends, but we got along with everybody. There was no friction. There was, everybody was their own individual, and we accepted them. In high school, favorite subjects was probably history, geography, and although I don't think I liked it until I got to my senior year, English. And the reason I liked English, which I didn't think I would, I happened to end up with the teacher who was supposed to be the toughest in school, and we just got along great. I would write stories, and she would send them to the newspaper. I had 2 or 3 stories published in the school newspaper. And then again, it was much easier because I took co-op in my senior year. That allowed me to go to school for 1 week and work for 1 week. Go back to school a week, go to work for 1 week. And they found me a job in Gimmel's department store, where, believe it or not, at the age of, 16, I was a complaint clerk. And then I was doing that for about 6 months, and I did away with the whole department. And I became a statistical engineer. And that was weird, because I know nothing about mathematics, but they had these Frieden calculators. You put the numbers in, the machine did all the work. Then after I graduated, I quit that job. Well, after I quit Gimmel's, which was when I graduated, I went to work for Chase Manhattan Bank, and I became an addressograph operator mechanic there. You know the dividend checks you get when you invest in stocks and everything? Well, I was a person who put your name on a list, made the plate for it, set up the machine to print the checks, and printed them. And I worked there, I guess, it must have been over a year I worked there. At some point, I joined the National Guard. I think it was around 1957 or so. And this was an anti-aircraft outfit. We used to go up to Camp Drum once a year for a couple of weeks and fire the anti-aircraft shells. And you would think these are just bullets that go up in the air. They are actually set by timers to explode within a certain time after being fired, so you can cover the different altitudes. But I didn't do that. I was a mechanic in a motor pool. And that's where I spent all my time. Then eventually, they came out with Nike missiles. So they did away with the anti-aircraft battalion I was in. And they wanted to transfer us up to, I think it was New Hyde Park or something like that, upstate New York. And I didn't want to go there. Of course, that was a long trip. That was like an hour and a half drive to get up there. So instead, I transferred into another National Guard unit on Staten Island that was adjacent to us, which was Armored Reconnaissance. And there they had the tanks and the personnel carriers and things like that. But again, I stayed in the motor pool. And I stayed there until we moved down here, and then I quit. I was in the National Guard maybe 6 years. I dated in high school. Don't remember what grade or age I was. Don't even remember the names of the people I dated. They just aren't important now. As far as dating and my parents goes, they never said anything. Never said do, never said don't, just never said. Everybody I knew or hung around with, we're talking mostly high school now, maybe a little while after high school. As far as dating goes, if they liked somebody or thought they looked pretty or they were interested in them, they would ask them for a date. If they said yes, it was great, they went out. If it clicked, they'd ask them again. If not, they didn't. If they said no, they'd ask somebody else. There was no big deal. I don't even know where I learned about the birds and the bees. It just came naturally, like it does to birds and bees. I met Mom while I was working in the National Guard, and in the National Guard, it was on a blind date. Arranged with somebody we knew in the National Guard. Well, in the National Guard, one of the people I knew was Jimmy Walters, and he was going out with this girl who knew my future wife. And she was supposed to go out with Captain Patton, who was the captain in charge of our whole unit. And for some reason, at that particular time that they were supposed to go out, he never showed up. This is the way I heard it anyhow. Subsequently, Jimmy was talking to his girlfriend, and Eleanor, my future wife, was there. And it came about somehow that he said something like, well, what is she doing on such and such a night? And she overheard Jimmy talking. She says, oh, I'm going out, with me. He was talking about me at the time. And I said, okay, I'll go. And that's how we ended up on a blind date. I was in the National Guard, and we went out. Had a good time. And when I first met her, I can still remember what she wore, white blouse, flowered skirt, and I knew after I saw her I was going to marry her. She didn't know that, though. It took a while. The reason I knew I wanted to marry her, or was going to marry her, was I was taken by her personality, the way she looked, the way she carried herself, her honesty, and she was just a complete package. First day wasn't a biggie. We just went down to the beach, walked on the beach a little bit. I don't even know if we stopped for a hot dog or anything on our way home. But that was basically it. And later I found out she only went out with me because I worked shift work. I was always working weekends, so she'd go out with me during the week. And on weekends, she'd go out with her other boyfriends. So I didn't find that out until after we got serious, though. And by then, she had dropped them, which was a good thing, because otherwise I wouldn't have made it. I don't really remember my wedding proposal. We had talked about getting married and everything, and she had said yes. I remember that, but I don't remember exactly how it came about. I do remember walking into her house one day with a paper bag, and I had her engagement ring in it, and I just gave it to her like it was a box of candy or gum or a pack of cigarettes or something. So that did surprise her, but that's really the only thing I remember. The wedding ceremony was like typical wedding ceremony. Reformed Church of Mariners Harbor on Richmond Terrace. It's no longer there. The reception was at the Columbian Hall, which is now a historic place of interest. The wedding itself was a family affair. Everybody from both sides of the family attended. We invited a few friends. It was an extravagant affair. I think it cost us $400. We paid for it. That includes the DJ or band. I don't even remember what we had. But that was at $400. My advice to anybody contemplating a serious relationship today would be true and honest to yourself. And don't give 50% and expect the other person to give 50%. Regardless of what the other person gives, you give 100%. Otherwise, it will never, ever work. If the situation arises where you're giving 100 and the other person's only giving 50, you give 150. You make it work. It's work, and you make it work. I was with the National Guard when I'm not sure if we've got married while I was with the National Guard or after the National Guard. It was probably after, but I realized that that's not where I wanted to be in a married life. So I quit the National Guard and I started looking for a job. And I saw this ad in the paper, went up, applied for it, and ended up getting the job. It was with a company called O'Hanlon Reports, or National Inspection Bureau. It was a detective agency in New York. And we would work primarily for insurance companies and go out and interview people with respect to different types of insurance: burglary, holdup, inland marine, homeowners insurance, car insurance, personal insurance, you name it. We interviewed them about it and made reports based on what we heard, what they said, depending upon the circumstances, on whether this was an acceptable risk or not. And it continued that way. I used to work primarily in Staten Island. After a while, I worked Staten Island and Brooklyn, went into Long Island, Manhattan, went up to Connecticut, and then I moved into New Jersey territory as well as Staten Island. But as the years went by, business seemed to decrease slowly, and I just felt it wasn't viable to stay there anymore. So a couple of the people who had worked up there had started their own business. I figured, well, let me give it a shot. And I started my own company. I called it Argonaut Services because Argonaut was a familiar name. Although a lot of people couldn't place it, it was still familiar to them. And I got my New Jersey license, formed a business, and that's how we got started. I went out soliciting companies, and it worked out. Starting a business was really not a struggle. I made more money starting this business than I did working there towards the end. So there was no struggle in starting it. It was work. There's no two ways about that. But I wouldn't really consider it to be a struggle. It was an endeavor that had to be done, so you made it work. In the business, my wife Eleanor, she managed the entire office. And honestly, without her doing that, I don't know if it would have been as successful, because in the beginning, I did all of the field work. And as time went on, I hired other people, but I would go out with them to train them. But she still managed the office. And even when I stopped going out, we had like 7 people working for us. She still managed the office. All I did was review the work, bill it, and send it out. But she did the nitty-gritty of every single day. That kept it going, kept the record straight, everybody in line, knew what had to be done, when things would due, and without her, it wouldn't have succeeded. My sons did work in the business, Bobby and Gary, and they were good at what they did. There was no question about that. The only thing is, I felt that because they only worked in my business, that they didn't get the full potential of what was available. So I encouraged them to go out and get a job themselves to see what it was like, compare what they were doing on the outside compared to what they were doing with me, to see which one they liked better, make a choice, and that would be the way it was. They were always welcome back in the business, and they did that. Gary went out and he found his niche. Bob found his niche. At one point, he did come back for a short period of time, but then he went back out again. Because when you go out, there's no responsibility to take the business home with you, so to speak. You do your job for the day, and after 8 hours, you're done. In the end, Bob found his niche working as a workers' comp manager for a company down in Gloucester City. And Gary, he was with AIG for many years, and he was happy there. When you have 4 kids, you don't remember their births so well. They were all normal births. We were very happy about all of them. The only one I do remember is Karen, because at that time we were really having trouble at the house with the air conditioning unit. And it was hot. It was July, and I wanted the house to be cool. So when my wife went into the hospital, I put the air conditioning on as low as I could, and I held it that way for 2 days, hoping it would be cool when she got home. And it wasn't. Just about made it. But they were all happy times. I can't really describe my children's personalities. They were all different, but yet similar. They were all caring. They were all intelligent, hardworking. I mean, what can you say? They all exceeded me, which was something I was really proud of, that they all did that. The only traditions I really tried to establish was that we all eat supper together. We all see each other on holidays, but the family is so fragmented now, it's really difficult to do. My favorite animal is Heather. She was a collie, and she was the perfect dog at the perfect time. She knew what you wanted without you even talking to her. She just had that mental capacity to read what you were thinking about. She was great with the kids, protective, and yet meek, mild, and gentle. I have no favorite artist. I have no favorite musician. I have no favorite author. My favorite drinks are A, vodka gimlet, B, Bloody Mary, but no horseradish in a Bloody Mary. Ice cream, I really switch between rum raisin and chocolate, although I do like the cherry chocolate bit vanilla. So I don't say I really have a favorite. I like many different varieties. Yeah, I have a favorite season. I like the spring. I like the spring because every time I see the buds coming up in flowers, I realize I've lived another year. Probably my favorite movie is Shane. It's just my favorite movie. It was well done. It interested me. I thought it appropriate. It's good versus evil with the good winning. I have no favorite vegetable. I like broccoli. I even like beets now. I like peas. I like green beans. I like most of them. I don't like the succotash or stuff like that. That's an easy one. My favorite song would be the 12th of Never. It just encompasses everything I believe in with respect to our marriage. Well, anybody who does not know the 12th of Never, there is no way to explain it. You listen to it, and if you don't believe in what the song espouses, then you probably shouldn't ever get married or have a meaningful relationship. It's hard to touch about Bobby because he died before his time, and the one thing my wife and I always dreaded was having a child die before us. Can't talk about it. We were living in Staten Island. My parents had an old RCA console. It was a radio, a phonograph, and the top would lift up. But on the top, there was an empty space. And that space was actually for a TV. TV was invented sometime in the 30s, but it really didn't come into prominence until after World War II. And then your TV was like a 7 or 9 inch round circle that they put a square box around. It was black and white, and the programming was terrible. It wasn't on all day. It wasn't on all night. I would say probably in the late 50s, color TV came in. And it started to be more popular then, although the price for a color TV at that time was like any place from $400 to $800, depending upon the size you got. And that was a lot of money back then. People were only making $3,000 a year. So it was a difficult period in time. Transistor radios came out then. Jet planes came out then. Sabre jets fought in a Korean conflict or war, depending on your outlook of the thing. And it was an interesting period of time, but not as interesting as at the time our grandparents were growing up, what they saw, what they lived through, the birth of electricity, the telegraph, the telephone, cars, motorcycles, trains, all these wondrous things. And ours pales in comparison. Computers at the beginning, they were nothing more than glorified typewriters. Now they're much more than that. When I was working for O'Hanlon, we used to go and look at the computer rooms that some of these people had. Took up a whole room, like 12 by 12 by 12 by 12. And nothing but computers and tapes on the walls, and all that is contained in one small computer now. And we would have to analyze the environment for that. It was a funny job working for them. Technology today stinks. It's 1984 come true. Don't need it, don't want it. Everybody walks around with a cell phone that they have to look at. They can't talk to one another. They have to text. Cameras watch you at the stoplight. They control your lives. Big Brother is watching you all the time. You can't go anyplace now without somebody knowing where you are and what you're doing if they really, really want to know. It's not trust your neighbor. It's not I can do this and be alone. You're not alone anymore. Impact on me and my beliefs. The only thing that had an impact on my belief was probably grammar school. I could not adhere to the policies of the Catholic Church. I felt they were discriminatory, arbitrary, and totally foolish, which is why I left. The worst people I've met in the world have been Catholics. Opinionated, they go to church and they confess, and they feel it. Okay, that's all right. I confessed, I'm healed, I'm safe. But they do the same thing over and over again. I mean, there are good Catholics, there's good people all around, but for the most part. And you look at the Catholic Church itself, the priesthood. Oh, priests were shielded. They committed sexual offenses, they did other things, but the Catholic Church hid them. They knew it was wrong, it was against their own beliefs, but yet they did it. So I don't have much sympathy for them. Never been arrested, never tried drugs. The only time I almost died was when I was a real small child, a couple of years old. I fell into Clove Lakes and one of my cousins pulled me out. That's about it. That's all I remember. Oh, there were things I enjoyed in my life. I enjoyed learning how to fly and flying. I enjoyed, some of my time in the National Guard, being on their rifle and pistol team. I enjoyed driving tanks and running over trees. I enjoyed a lot of things, but there's nothing of great significance other than being married and, raising your kids. Everything else is not really important. I think I lived my life honestly, honorably, and I think I did the best I could. I made mistakes. Some things I can remember, some things I can't. If I had to do over again, I'd probably just do the same damn thing, but did the best I could. I have no significant regrets. Made mistakes, can't go back, can't undo them, so you move ahead. My words of wisdom: be honest with yourself, be honest with others. You get that $10 and change at the cashier who made a mistake, give it back. It's not worth it. I would like my grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren to know I love them. We are the sum total of everyone and every being in our family who has gone before us. And that's why it goes on and continues. They loved me like I love them. I can't think of anything else to say other than what I've already repeated, that I'm doing this so that future generations will have a record that they can hear and listen to and judge and maybe get to know me better. The records I have of my great-grandparents, they're just names. I don't know them. You know, I want to, but I don't. That's all.